Chapter 1, A Shot in the Dark. Writer Saki Hector Hugh Munro. Question answers with word meaning, complete explanation in Hindi. Words to know. Word and meaning. Acquaintances. Acquaintances. A person who knows slightly rather than a close friend. यानी एक ऐसा पर्सन जो क्लोज फ्रेंड से थोड़ा कम रहे पर जानता हो. Agreeable, pleasing. Astuteness, cleverness. Airfully, very informal, colloquial. Crosslet, a symbol in the shape of cross used on the coats of arms. Demi-lion, a symbol of the top half of a lion used on the coats of arms. Disarray, untidy and disorganized. Elusive, difficult to find. Expounded, explained in detail. Futile, pointless. Gratified, pleased. Ineffectually, not producing the desired effect. Nomination, putting forward a candidate for election. Obliged, to be indebted or grateful. Pantomime, a dramatic entertainment with exaggerated characters and actions. Quid, slang term used for British pound sterling. Rambler, a hiker. Recommenced, begin again. Ruefully, sorrowfully or pitifully. Comprehension. Question number 1. Answer the following question. What position does Philip Slatherby hope to get? Philip Slatherby hopes to become the Member of Parliament for the country of Yorkshire. The country Yorkshire was of immediate personal interest to Philip Slatherby. It was held for the government in the present Parliament by a gentleman who did not intend to seek re-election, and Slatherby was under serious consideration by the party managers as his possible successor. Second question. Who is Philip Slatherby on his way to visit and why? Philip was on his way to an influential lady in London. He was bound for Brill Manor, the country residence of his own acquaintances. Mrs. Saltpen Jago, Honorio Saltpen Jago, was a person of some social importance in London, of considerable importance and influence in the country of Yorkshire. Slatherby believed that if he could secure the goodwill of Mrs. Jago, then he might count on the nomination as an assured thing. C. What is meant by an approval? On approval mean official approbation or sanction, or in other words, favorable regards. Next question. How does Bertie know that Philip Slatherby is going to visit Bertie's mother? Answer. The Slatherby had chanced upon his club acquaintances and had chatted with him a while through his carriage window. During this little conversation, the fact that he was going to visit Mrs. Salpen Jago for the weekend became obvious, as his friend had mentioned her name, and that is how Slatherby's fellow passengers in the carriage, the Bertie, got to know about the former visit to the latter's mother. Where is Bertie going? The Bertie was heading towards a little country inn near Bronquay for 3 days. F. What are the 6 items Bertie has in his pockets? A cigarette case, matchbox, key, silver pencil case, a railway ticket, and 6 penny were the 6 items in the Bertie's pocket. G. What has Bertie forgotten, and what does he want Philip Slatherby to do? Bertie said that he had forgotten his purse that had 4 quid in it. So now that he is in the need of the money, he sought help from the Slatherby, The Slatherby was asked to lend him £2, 10 or 3. H. What are the two reasons why Philip Slatherby does not help Bertie? Philip thought initially wished to lend Bertie the money, did not do it ultimately. He was suspicious of his behavior. First of all, when he inquired of his crest, he became alert as he figured out a disparity. This made him cautious and led him to pretend that he had never met Bertie's mother. When Bertie was asked about the appearance of his mother, then too his answer was suspicious to Mr. Philip and denied to give money to Bertie. These questions are more difficult. Discuss them first. Who is the other man travelling to Brill Manor, and what are three things we learn about him? The other man travelling to Brill Manor in the same train is Cloud People, an important lawyer. The three things we learn about Cloud People are that he is a lawyer, he is not someone who can notice of his companion went silent for some time, and that he is pretty excited about the mechanism of the car. Which part are the parts of the story show us that Philip Slatherby thinks highly of himself? Answer. Slatherby indeed thought highly of himself. It was evident from the fact that he was mightily pleased with himself on the Bertie's episode, and that he thought this incident of his clear trap would earn him applause at the dinner. Which part of the story show us that it was written and set up in the past? Answer. The story was written in the past tense from the fact that the Slatherby was not aware of the changes made in Mrs. Jago's life. Question number 2. Reference to contest. The Philip Slatherby settled himself down in an almost empty railway carriage with a pleasant feeling of starting off on an agreeable and profitable trip. First, explain which would best describe how this character is feeling: irritated, smug, or embarrassed. Smug. Answer. Smug. Second, how does he feel at the end of the story? Slatherby was dumbfounded after learning about the crest and Mrs. Jago's initial hair color. He was taken aback at his own stupidity and perhaps embarrassed and repented not helping Bertie. Next, how does the hope to profit from the trip? He had hoped to win Mrs. Jago's favor and ensures his nomination in the election, as she was one of the most influential women in the Yorkshire as well as in London. Next question. There was a tinge of coldness in his voice. What does the statement mean? Answer. The phrase means that the voice lacked warmth and affection. Who is this describing? This is describing Philip Slatherby. Why does he feel as he does? On learning that crest of Bertie had demi-loin holding a crosslet in its paw, while the crest of Mrs. Jago had a running greyhound, Slatherby felt that the Bertie was lying about his identity and might be a fraud. Hence his voice grew cold with the growing suspicion. Next, the train moved on, leaving the so-called son of the Saltpen Jago family cursing furiously on the platform. First, whose perspective is being expressed here? Philip Slatherby's perspective is being expressed here. What is meant by so-called? So-called is an expression used to describe someone or something is inappropriate. Why is Bertie cursing furiously? The Bertie was cursing furiously as he could not manage to get the financial help that he had sought from Slatherby. Working with words. Use the following words in the sentence of your own. Sedately. We should cross the road sedately. Noisily. The crackers burst noisily. Furiously. The children were fighting furiously. Promptly, we should do our work promptly. Carelessly, carelessly driving leads to accidents. Scarcely, water for drinking is scarcely enough on our planet. Ruefully, TV anchor speaks ruefully about the train accident. Ineffectually, the speaker spoke ineffectually at the party. Hastily, my mother worked hastily. Rightly, teacher rightly points out my mistake. Presently, Prachi is presently working on number of projects. Severely, she was severely depressed due to the bad results in the exam. Use the following words in the sentence of your own. Scrutinized. The police inspector scrutinized the thieves. Spies. She suddenly spied a shooting star in the sky. Picked out. The naughtiest child of the class was picked out as the monitor. Stared. Everyone stared at the question paper during the exam. Searched. I searched for my book in the bag. Spotted. Larry and Fatty spotted the clues of the mystery. Saw. I saw the picnic bus passing by. Looked. She looked out of the window. Glanced. She glanced at the poster. Observed. Teacher performed the practical and the student observed carefully. Fixed eyes on. The policeman fixed eyes on the culprit. Question number 3. Can you use the following in two ways to bring out their different meaning? Horribly. I have got a horrible feeling. We have been cheated. It was a horrible car accident. Terribly. I am not terribly interested in fashion. They suffered terribly when their dog died. Frightfully. I am frightfully sorrow. The children entered in the class frightfully. Pretty. She has a pretty face. This sum was pretty difficult to solve. Make up the interesting sentence of your own using the following ought to feel. Ought to feel. They ought to feel happy because they have done well. Ought to go. I ought to go to the hospital as it is an emergency. Ought to write. I ought to write as it is an exam. Ought to have been. I ought to have been present as attendance is compulsory. Oughtn't to hear. I ought not to hear bad news coming in the news channel. Ought he to. Ought he to obey the rules? B would not have gone this way. Ought he to commit to such a job? He would not have backed out. Ought to know. We ought to know the bad effects of the global warming. Ought not to play. He ought not to play his tournament. Ought they to return. Ought they to return this Friday. Get the snacks ready. Character sketch Philip Slatherby. This character is taken from the prose A Shot in the Dark written by H. Muniro Saki. He wanted to become a politician in the city of Yorkshire. He was ambitious and looked forward to contest for a seat in the Yorkshire with the recommendation of a level-headed woman, Mrs. Salpen Jago. He is fortunate to have been invited by Salpen Jago for the weekend at Brill Manor. He is optimistic and believes that his political pilgrimage would turn out to be a blessing. There is something mean about him, as he is unwilling to show any interest in the affairs of an angry young companion. Philip loves things and uses people to advance his career prospects. He is doubtful as he becomes suspicious about Bertie, who introduced himself as the second son of Mrs. Jago. He is proud of having led a trap for Bertie by saying that he has never seen his mother. He thinks very high of himself and prided himself for a cleverness and astuteness as he does not fall prey to Bertie's trap. Later he is shocked to see the double crest on the cart door panel. Mr. Slatherby realized that his cleverness has in reality turned out to be a foolishness. He becomes troubled that his political future may be lost. He has proved himself penny wise and pound stupid. Character sketch Bertie. The character is taken from the prose A Shot in the Dark, written by H. Munro Saki. Bertie was a second son of Mrs. Salpen Jago. He is a careless young man who had left the purse behind after stealing an envelope with the crest on it. He was ash- cashless and needed money. He was cashless and needed money to clear bills at Pronque. He asked Mr. Sladaby to lend him money. He was adventurous and loved to have fun. He resembled his mother. Both mother and son shared the crest design. His crest was a demi-lion, while his mother had a running greyhound crest. His mother's hair and his hair was dark brown. He was ignorant of the fact that his mother had turned blonde. He insisted that she had dark brown hairs. Thus it appears he was playing a foul game. He became a case of mistake and identity because he didn't know the changes in his mother. So he was taken for a fraud. Salpen Jago. This character is taken from the prose A Shot in the Dark, written by H. Munro Saki. Mrs. Alpen Jago is a brilliant and level headed woman. She is a clear thinker. She knows exactly when to take up an individual or a social cause. Being a lady of discernment, she may choose to drop a person if she finds him or her unworthy. She is an influential lady, but occasionally she is eccentric. She spoils herself and her chance by being too restless. She used to have beautiful dark brown hairs which suited well with her fresh complexion. Recently, she electrified the people by dyeing her hair blonde. It has in fact ruined her looks. Cloud People reveals many details about Mrs. Salpenjago. It is obvious that her influence in the Chakshar is more due to her affluence and large estate than that her personality traits. The only thing charming about her was that she was a good hostess.